Hi, welcome. Good afternoon, it's Gene from Avstar. Guys, you're going to lose everything. After this video, you'll have some idea. You know, I'm not going to convince everyone because it's been an uphill battle for the last at least 5 years, but a lot of people know that we've been on YouTube now, coming up 12 years. But people are going to lose everything. And that means some of you guys that are listening right now, do you have any idea what's happening? They have lied and stole trillions of pounds on the back of carbon taxes globally. And they're still continuing to do it. Investing in their friends' businesses for these renewable energies like solar panels and wind turbines and all the other glamorous forms of producing electricity that you can imagine. I mean, this chart tells the truth. You know, if we are going into global warming, like it says there, present global warming is lower than the medieval warm period, a lot lower than the Roman warm period and the Eleusinian warm period. So why now is it so critical? Why is it being put on the agenda at all when we are at the lowest point? If you look at the very bottom of this chart, you'll see when we had a glacial period and when we had an interglacial period. And the interglacials seem like they're a lot longer time spent compared to the glacial periods. That's because this chart only goes back 13,000 years of the 100,000 year Milankovitch cycle. And that cycle is what produces glacial periods and interglacial periods. We spend around 15,000 years in an interglacial. That's the truth of it. But, you know, look at what they're saying. And they're blaming it on the humans of today. Well, you know, when the Industrial Revolution started around 1760 here in the UK, we kicked the Industrial Revolution off big time. And that's when we started using fossil fuels like coal from that period. But we've cut back on them. You know, in the last 20 years, we've cut back massively on them. Most of the coal collieries in the UK are closed. I don't know of any, but I live within 10 miles of two of them that have closed. Dordon is one of them. And what's the other one? Baddesley is another. And like I say, I live within 10 miles of both of these coal collieries that have closed, that employed a lot of the local people around here. But, you know, because of these carbon taxes, people lost jobs, but the rich waxed themselves wealthy out of it. And I'm not going to keep going on about this chart because I've talked about it quite a lot in the past. And there's all the evidence you need to know about the truth about CO2 causing global warming. And, you know, all the fossil fuels that were being blamed for causing global warming. But what annoys me even more that is companies like YouTube being bullied by governments, you know, and threatened that they will pay license fees if they don't get a grip on people like me talking on my channel. And, you know, I tried to explain to people 5 years ago, yeah, if you do not support me, this channel's going to leave YouTube. And it pretty much has done that. We've had to go over now, and it's fair as well, and that's reward the people that are patrons, because they are now in receipt of the Earth Alpha at a Glance, which covers CO2, atmospheric oxygen measurements, radiation measurements, and a whole lot more. You know, we monitor the active in eruption volcanoes globally. You can find out what earthquake has happened in the last 24-hour period, what magnitude of earthquake and where it was. So we've done a hell of a lot, and we said to our subscribers, support us or you lose us. They might have think that this isn't something that was ever going to happen, and it has. And they shouldn't be surprised, because if they've watched all the local butchers globally now disappear off the high streets, and these big super chains like Walmart, Target, etc. take over the business, not only as the high streets in these gorgeous little villages towns and small cities disappeared and look ugly now, and they're boarded up or shuttered up and no one's using them. You've also lost not just that company, that warm, welcoming high street. You've lost employment in the area. And what was the other thing I was going to say you've lost? Oh yeah, the variety. Let me give you, for instance, go to one of these large supermarkets and try and buy oxtails. Try and get them. Try and get a T-bone steak, or a tomahawk steak. Try from your local supermarkets to get these things, because here in the UK, those things that I've mentioned, as well as a lot of other things like rabbits, pheasants, all the other things that used to be in the butcher's shop have gone, as well as the lights like lungs, kidneys, liver, heart, things like that. Tongue. You try and get tongue from a local supermarket, you won't. But I tried to tell people, and now we've had to fall back on the last resort. Because people are not listening to what is going on and how the world is being destroyed in front of them. I'm going to talk about just a couple of subjects briefly about what I'm talking about. I had my nephew over here stay with me for the last 3 days, just for a break for him, from his normal routine. And he brought over with him these 3D goggles, the latest ones. And I watched him talking to other people in these rooms, some women, some men, about various topics. And I had never tried these goggles on, by the way, up until yesterday, and I was quite shocked. The one thing, I went on a roller coaster and nearly made me feel sick because my head was going all over the place. And of course, it's what you're visualising in those goggles is artificial, but your head naturally moves, for the bend that's about to come up, and you brace for when it's slowing down or it's going up steep, that look dangerous things. But the other one, I'll just briefly talk about it. It's called Worldview, and on a few of these pictures, you've got like a perspective of being about 1,500 feet above a city, like Dubai. And it's like you're flying. You can literally look down at where your feet would be, and you just see all around you in a 360 degree, vision, if you want. Great detail, and get that perspective like you're flying. So, what is the damaging that this is going to cause? And it certainly is. Well, people, and I know this has already happened, you might know a few people, but people are going to become well unsociable. They're not going to be sociable people in the future. They are not going to be in a relationship either because of these 3D goggles. And I can imagine what's going on. People that can't afford to go out now go online with these goggles, meet up in these artificial reality nightclubs and chat, but nothing will come out of that, or very little will. So people's relationships are at risk here. But that's not all. With the artificial intelligence that's increasing alongside robotics, it's going to destroy jobs. So we're destroying all the things, around us, destroying relationships, destroying jobs. And people like Elon Musk aren't sincere like he tries to make out. That guy is a monster. And he's also a well-known ketamine addict. I want to ask you something. Would you let a taxi driver that you knew was on ketamine take one of your kids to school tomorrow? One of your children to nursery? No way would you do that. But this is exactly he's doing. And people don't understand that Optimus Generation 3 robot, which is shortly to become available to the mass public for $20,000 or so, is a potential massive hazard. Because when that does malfunction, what you've got to realise is that them arms on that robot, because it's humanoid, are not soft. Some of them components of that robotic's arms are titanium. And you imagine that flailing round when it malfunctions at 200 miles an hour. One punch or one slap off that robot's arms or legs or its head, as I've seen people, where they've brought these robots out into the street, the robot has malfunctioned, walked up to the actual barrier and head-butted somebody. I don't think the robot intentionally went over there and said, oh, headbutter. It was a malfunction, and that was the end result. So you're going to put one of these in your house, again, with your elderly relatives, possibly, or possibly your children. You will be in the kitchen, or you will be doing something distracted, and that has the potential to malfunction and flail around. One slap, one kick, or some other part of its body hits one of your children and they're dead. But people think robotics and artificial intelligence is great. But here's the thing, when we become more antisocial because of things like 3D goggles and these artificial reality clubs and places to socialise, where, let me tell you something, it's a delusion to start with, because there is no socialising, because the first thing is you never left your settee, your sofa, you never even left your living room or wherever you was using the goggles. You didn't leave your home. So yes, they're super antisocial, but let me tell you something, these robots are going to become not just company for people in the future, they're going to become partners. I kid you not. I can take that to the bank, 100%. So, relationships destroyed. The truth about our climate, an illusion of truth. Artificial AI and robots, taking the jobs away. And then, what will take the rest away? The corruption. And from the corruption from the politicians will destroy literally everything else. And my big frustration is, why is no one doing anything about this? And why is nobody doing anything at all? And I want you to think about what I'm about to say next. Why is no one doing anything about the war crimes that are clearly being undertaken in Ukraine right now and Gaza? Because you would expect pity if you was undergoing that same treatment, if you was in that country, or that your country that you're in right now was experiencing such horricities. None of it leads to a golden bridge, I can guarantee you that. None of this, what I've mentioned, will take you anywhere positive in the future. So my question is, why are you letting it go? You had more choice 20 years ago than what you've got today. You had more jobs 20 years than what you've got today. And just, if you don't believe me about relationships, have a look what's going on the internet, on the YouTube and other social platforms, TikTok. People are complaining that no one wants to know anymore. This is a complete fabric breakdown of our reality. Do you understand that? And what's replacing our reality? An artificial reality. You can't beat anything that's real, let me tell you. If you think you can replace it with artificial, then I ask you, or I charge you, to go and eat artificial 3D printed meat and feed your family for the next week on it. If you think artificial is better than real, go ahead. But you know what? it's water off a duck's back, everything I've said here. Because people, as I have been proven to with my channel on YouTube, people don't listen, they don't act, and they certainly don't stick together. And the support what used to be 25 years ago for community spirit and communities has left the building. Now all we've got is promises from these politicians which they never keep and never will. You know, we've got the delusion of artificial realities and the promise of having a robot that will do all the work around our house and keep us safe at the same time. And whilst everybody is deluded with just those things, on top of that, they are also deluded with the fact of whether or not what's taking place in Ukraine right now and Gaza is a war crime, a serious war crime. You were crazy if you thought I was on the YouTube for the money, because we're practically what we set out and what was our main objection on our channel we don't talk about. You want to find out about the pole position, then the only place you're going to find that is on Patreon, and it costs virtually nothing to become a member, less than a coffee. So I've seen the majority of our subscribers, and I'm talking the majority. I'll tell you how many people are on Patreon with us, and they've been on there for quite some time because they appreciate what I do. We've got 130 patrons out of, compared to YouTube subscriptions of 58,000. Isn't that a terrible outcome? So am I wrong in thinking that nothing's going to change and that people are not going to help themselves? Because what I see, mainly, the majority, is people helping themselves. And that leads very, very quickly to a broken community. And it doesn't matter what country you're in. When you have no democracy being practiced, and clearly we don't, then you can expect that society to disappear very quickly, just like your high streets, just like this observatory did on YouTube. So mark my words, what I've talked about is what I would consider remarks from a very intelligent person. That's what I like to think of myself, you know. I can do a lot, I've got a lot of skills, you know, programming. It took me 2 years to program that TriMag system and build it and get it completed. Driven only by the fact I couldn't afford to pay anybody, but wanted to get the information out for people that were interested in the topic. And then people just failed to support it. And people don't even bother in the comments section saying it's the cost of living crisis. You can kiss my arse with that excuse. Don't tell me people don't have the price of a cup of coffee to keep something really relevant. Here's the thing, the pole reversal, last time it completed it was 780,000 years ago. You got one of the rarest events on your doorstep and your governments aren't talking about it. Isn't that amazing? Your mainstream media, which are controlled by the governments, aren't talking about it either. That should tell you that we are over the target on a subject that is very important. Let me tell you something. Mars died when it lost its magnetosphere. Ask any scientist at all about what happened to Mars, and ask them what happened next to its water on its planet. And you lose your magnetosphere, you'll be subject to harmful cosmic radiation to start with. And don't worry about just cardiac arrhythmic effects, it affecting the natural beat of your heart, because it affects a lot worse than that. We're talking multiple possibilities of cancers of all sorts. But then your climate, dramatically changes on your planet, and then you lose your water. If you lose your magnetosphere and the water, everybody and everything alive on this planet, perhaps apart from, I don't know, simple zooplankton, bacteria, or chemowater as they're known, that live at the bottoms of the deepest oceans along what's called black smokers. They're probably the only ones that won't be affected. But everybody else is dead. Absolutely dead. Because those are what maintain life on a planet. And with that, guys, I hope that the subjects I've talked about, you've realised that they're true. And this is where we're going. Absolutely, we're going there. Everything will be destroyed eventually. And most of you are just hoping that it won't be in your time. But it's sad to think that, your grandchildren might have to pick up the tab for this. Because the narrative has already been set for that to happen. And it might not just be money and taxes. Could very well be the ability to live. There's links down there, guys, if you want to help support us. If a few of you start supporting, we'll bring it back to YouTube. But people have got to support it if that's what they want. They want to know what's going on with the planet. Then there's the links down there in the description. Support us. If not, then, we will always encourage people to come over to Patreon. It's the cost of a cup of coffee. Hope to see you over there. So what you do, as always, bye for now.